This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs.
The Sony A1 II is here. I'm gonna tell you everything you need to know in less than 20 seconds. So you take the best parts out of the A1, the same blazing fast sensor, the speed, video specs, EVF, and now you combine that with the A9 III's ergonomics, AI autofocus, pre-capture, throw some extra sprinkles on there, you got your new flagship camera, folks. You know, objectively, there isn't anything revolutionary about this camera. There isn't any real innovation being introduced with the A1 II. Sony focused on refining this camera and made improvements that a professional is going to appreciate. My feeling is there's going to be a lot of pissed off people about the A1 II, just like when the R5 II was announced, and that's okay. Look, I've been a hardcore A1 user since the beginning. I've tried many other cameras. I always go back to the A1 for reasons that I'll explain later on in this video. And also the biggest problem that I have with the A1 II and why I think that a lot of A1 users, current A1 users, are gonna feel a little salty about this announcement. Also, this is not gonna be my typical launch video. Usually I put in like 2 to 3 weeks of just editing for these kind of videos. I didn't put in that time. I've been spending a lot of time with my daughter and less time on work. I had this camera for about 3 weeks. I got to tinker with it and use it a lot on my personal time. And I just think that me being an A1 user from the beginning, I think that my opinion, my real world experience with the camera, it will provide some value for you in this video. So the A1 II has the same 50 megapixel stacked sensor. Sony claims that this time it has better low light image quality at mid to high ISO. I'm not mad at it. All right. In my opinion, this is still one of the greatest sensors to ever be put in a camera. Usually there is a trade-off with image quality and sensor readout speed. And I just never noticed that trade-off or any trade-off with the A1. Top tier image quality, insane readout speed on the sensor. I have a feeling that this sensor is going to be recycled over and over, kind of like how the A7S III sensor has been recycled, because it's so good. You get the same 30 frames per second continuous shooting in RAW. You get the same amount of RAW photos in a burst. And just like the A9 III, now you can customize, you have a speed button here, a boost button. Now you can customize the speed. So for example, you can set the camera to 20 frames per second, and then you can map the speed boost button to 30 frames per second and press it when peak action starts. In my opinion, I think that 4 years later, this could have been a cool opportunity to maybe bump that frames per second a little higher just for the spec sheet, maybe match the R1 a little bit because the R1 does 40 frames per second at 24 megapixels. This could have, hey, 40, I can match you with the higher resolution sensor. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't think pros really care. I think 30 frames per second is plenty fast, especially given that you got the A9 III with the 120 frames per second option out there. I digress. The A1 II inherits the A9 III autofocus with the AI chip. You got all the same subject detection from people to planes. And now you have a new auto mode where the camera can automatically detect what kind of subject you are shooting. In my opinion, it works okay. It usually takes a second for it to recognize a person or object. I think Canon has been doing this for a while. Theirs is faster and more reliable, I think. But look, the bigger improvements are in the non-human AF modes, like animal AF. I'm constantly taking pictures of my dogs messing around in the house at 30 frames per second, and the hit rate on the A1 II is much higher than the original A1 for that. I would say that my only complaint about the autofocus is how twitchy and erratic it can be at times. Now, what I mean by that is I could stand right in front of the camera and it'll constantly try to size me up. It'll size the box. It'll go smaller to bigger, smaller to bigger. It's constantly trying to figure out which size of a box it should create for me or whatever object I'm shooting. And it kind of, Canon has been doing this for a while. I think the auto mode is better and it's less twitchy, and it kind of reminds me of my ADHD brain a little bit. But other than that, the hit rate is great. I mean, I haven't had a chance to shoot sports or anything like that, but I have been shooting my dogs and they're crazy. Hit rate was really good. You also get the same A9 III pre-capture up to 1 second. This has to be a top 3 feature that Sony users have been waiting for. And unfortunately, I think a lot of A1 users like myself, it's easy to become salty about this because pre-capture started to become a standard in the other camera brands later on in the year when the A1 was launched. So it's like you just missed that threshold when everyone started to incorporate pre-capture into their cameras. I'll save this rant for later. All right, you also get the A9 III ergonomics, and this includes the 4-way screen, which I think is the best screen on any camera. Okay, I hope that one day the 4-way screen will be the standard for all cameras, whether you're photo or video focused, because being able to tilt straight up and the screen being aligned with the EVF and then being able to have the option to flip it to the side or even to yourself, it doesn't get any better than that. You get the same 1/400 flash sync speed. Now, this is kind of taken for granted sometimes, I think. There's just no other full frame camera that can do this. And it's probably the main reason why I reach for the A1 when I'm in the studio. When I'm not shooting Hasselblad, I'm shooting with the A1 because I have that 1/400 flash sync speed. This really comes in handy when you are trying to, let's say, control the ambient lighting in the studio and I don't want to enter high-speed sync, or just gives me more flexibility with the settings that I'm using in my camera. You also get the same 9.44 million dot EVF with a 240 refresh rate. Big, beautiful EVF, one of the best out there for full frame. The issue with this one is that it had a display lag where after you take a photo, the image will appear slightly blurry. If you had like review set to on, that was always a thing. It was kind of tricky, but they fixed that with the A1 too. Really happy about that. They also now have included in the box some new iCup options. So it also now features a dedicated mic for voice memo. And then now the grip is slightly larger and it's slightly, changed the angle on how your grip feels on the camera. And for the most part, I do like it. The one thing I don't like about it is that I find that my finger or the top of my hand is always rubbing up against, what is this called? The lug or the camera strap loop. It's always rubbing up against that, even more than this one. That's probably my only issue. If you've held an A9 III, you know what I'm talking about, or maybe you do, maybe you don't. And now for the first time, Sony is introducing a new dual battery charger that will come with the A1 II in the box, but it will also be sold separately. The image stabilization has been improved. Like, let's be honest, the IBIS Sony cameras has never really been great. Okay, well now the A1 II, they've improved it to 8.5 stops of image stabilization and now features things like dynamic active stabilization that is for video, but is truly the best stab that I've ever used in any full frame camera. That was introduced in the ZV-E1. Now, speaking of video, nothing has really changed here. So you get that same oversampled 8K video up to 4K 120. Now you can upload those LUTs so you can monitor your footage as if you were already color grading it. It has the AI framing stabilizer that debuted on the ZV-E1 as well, and a lot of other small improvements and additions.
Okay, before I speak on what the final price is and what my issues are with the Sony A1 II, I gotta show some love to today's sponsor. Yeah, you guessed it, Squarespace.
Now, if you've been looking to start a website, blog, or even an online store, what are you waiting for? It's about that time. With Squarespace, you can secure your own custom domain, and then you can create a professional looking website quickly and easily. And when I say that, that's one of the best parts about it. You need zero skills when it comes to coding and graphic design. One of the newest and coolest features, it's called Design Intelligence, which now it helps you design your site that's unique to you using AI technology. Follow that with the SEO feature that Squarespace offers. You're gonna have an easily searchable, high-performing website. And if you wanna, let's say, start a side hustle, you can start an online store like I did and make passive income while you sleep. Don't forget, if you use the code Manny, you will get 10% off your first purchase. The time is now. The link is below. Okay, so now brace yourself. This camera is going to be the same price of the OG A1 at $6,500. And when I try to put this into perspective, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. 4 years ago, the A1 was revolutionary. There was no other camera that can shoot that fast and at that high resolution. The closest competitors at the time were the Canon R5 and the Z9. Both could shoot up to 20 frames per second in RAW. So even those cameras could do 80-90% of what the A1 could do. It's still, the A1 was in a class of its own. But see, the thing is that now in 2024, still, I mean, I can sit here and argue that there still isn't a direct competitor to the A1 that can match the readout speed of this sensor and doing it at 50 megapixels, which is maybe why Sony is still pricing this camera so high. But the difference now in 2024, there's a camera called the R5 Mark II. It can also shoot high resolution photos up to 30 frames per second in RAW. Granted, the sensor isn't as fast as the A1, but still the closest thing to an Apple comparison to the A1. And that camera, the R5 Mark II, is priced at $4,200. My thoughts are that if I were Sony, the only way to justify a $6,500 price tag in 2024 is by throwing the kitchen sink at it. Like similar to what Nikon did with the Z9, the A1 should have everything, all the video features, all the advanced monitoring tools. It should be able to do absolutely everything for that price. Now, as a current A1 user, and maybe I speak for some A1 users out there, I just think the part that sucks is how the A1 was released right before a lot of the newer features were being introduced. And the biggest one that comes to mind is the AI autofocus that was introed in the A7R5 about a year and a half after the A1. Let's be honest, that autofocus system would have made more sense in the A1 camera than a slower camera with high resolution, more of a portrait camera. Another example, in 2021, Canon and Nikon both introduced pre-capture into their cameras. So it's like, damn it, like I got in at the wrong time. It's like buying a car at the end of the cycle and then they're gonna refresh it the next year. It's kind of one of those things. But it is what it is. Let me know your thoughts on that. Now, looking at the A1 II for what it is, this is pretty much the perfect camera for me and my use case. I shoot portraits, I shoot sports occasionally, I shoot video of myself. Sony has addressed almost every issue that I and many others have had about the A1. So I will hopefully be taking this camera to Africa, hopefully, in a couple of weeks, along with my original A1. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be my first real world kind of video on the A1 II. And I really want to get down to, like, is this camera, is it justifiable to spend another $6,500 for the A1 II? We will find out very soon. Talk to you later. Oh, Papa. Look at my puppy. Can you see my puppy? Hi, puppy. Hi. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.